Welcome, everybody, to this release class, Anger in the Body. So, a bit of a hybrid class today where we'll spend some time workshopping and really getting to understand the roots of anger, what it is that's happening in the nervous system, and then start to work into some somatic methods for processing and for release. So this is what's coming up. We'll start talking about anger and the nervous system, and then we'll move to talking about the messages beneath anger, primary versus secondary anger, the angry part. So those of you familiar to me might recognize this as a little taster of IFS, internal family systems, or otherwise known as parts work. So this might be a new approach to some of you, and it's really about how can we look at the different parts of ourselves through the lens of them being protective parts rather than being personality flaws. And then we'll get into a somatic portion of the class. And then I have a little offer and time for Q&A. And so when I say offer, I want you to know, because I've signed up for how many free classes in my time, really excited because it's going to be promising something. And then I find out in the class that it's a sale the whole time and they're just trying to sell me something. This is not what this is. There will be an offer for you at the end. You can take it or leave it, or you can choose to sign out. I hate classes that don't deliver really amazing value. So this will be jam-packed with value, and we will pop that on at the end, and it is up to you. So let's start just by kind of conceptualizing the amazing content that we're going to work with today. And if you know me and you're in my world, you know that underneath everything we do, we have this foundation rooted in nervous system science. And so we will kind of wrap this foundation around our work today by understanding our autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is this being inside you that helps to run mostly unconscious processes. So you can think of it as things like it's helping kind of control and regulate energy output. It's helping with your breath. It's helping heart rate and temperature and regulating all of these processes that are happening below your conscious and cognitive awareness, not something that you need to control. And it also helps to drive our stress and threat responses. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And the reason we need to understand this system before we get into the work we're doing is because we need to know that these responses are reflexive, they're automatic, and they inform constantly throughout our day how safe we feel. And if we are in a threat response, this will too drive our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. So, as much as it feels like we should be in the driver's seat controlling all of that stuff, there's a lot of influence that comes from the layers of the unconscious. And when we're in those threat states and we're activated, we actually drop down into a more emotional and survival regions of our brain. And so, therefore, we lose access to the more rational, logical part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. And therefore, we lose access to choice and to curiosity and to presence and to connection and to openness. And so, if we can understand this as an experience of anger through the lens of the nervous system, then we can take this unconscious reaction and process that's happening below the surface and bring it to the conscious, where we can choose new ways to respond. And really importantly, where we can actually use tools that speak the language of the nervous system using body-oriented practices and ones that are correctly matched to the need, which is what we're going to do today. So today you're going to learn several things, tools, practices that will begin to expand your capacity, your nervous system's capacity to respond rather than react, and to help you to process anger. Because so many of us, and this was so me in the past, we've only ever really looked at this stuff through a top-down lens. And we've tried to force ourselves to behave differently, or to think differently, to think positively, And most of the time, it doesn't stick. It might work for a little bit through sheer force and effort and willpower, but it only is addressing a little part of the picture. And so we need to go deeper into our protective patterns and work there. So this nervous system, to briefly explain, is split into these two branches. We've got our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. You can see the branches drawn there. Sympathetic is fight and flight. This is what we often know it is a stress response. But I really want to pivot our way that we view this and talk about our sympathetic nervous system today as saying that actually your sympathetic nervous system is responsible for activation and mobilization, right? It's the thing that gets you ready and prepared to face any kind of threat or challenge. And so it's not a bad thing to have a sympathetic charge in your nervous system. I have one now just presenting, right? But we can do that in a way that feels regulated and safe, which brings us to the parasympathetic branch of our nervous system. We've often blanketed this as the idea of it's rest and digest, and that's where we feel calm. But actually, that part of the nervous system itself is split off into these two branches. The ventral vagal, you see that there in the little green branch, that's our social engagement system. So that's where we feel when we're in that, we're calm and we're kind of curious and we're regulated and we want to connect with people and we've got access to compassion. The other branch inside parasympathetic nervous system is dorsal vagal. And this is more of a shutdown or freeze state. Freeze is very nuanced. It's not just dorsal, but a full collapse or immobilization is dorsal. It's also just a place of conservation, right? So we go into that state when we need to protect and slow down and really, really turn inwards. So this, when you look at it like this, and a lot of people's understanding of the nervous system is that it's actually just in these neat little buckets, right? We're either in our parasympathetic or we're in our sympathetic. And that's not actually really how it works. It's a really fluid, moving, dynamic system. And we can have a real mixture of different nervous system states active at once. So even the feeling of anger can feel safe when we mix in that green, that ventral vagal. So anger creates mobilization, right? The body prepares to act, to protect, to push back, or to create change. That's what it's doing for us. It's propelling us into the sympathetic state for that readiness. And a lot of the time, we interrupt that response. We suppress the no, we smile our way through it, if you've been like me with a real history of fawn or people pleasing, we often just completely override our own boundaries. We may then begin to tense and brace through the body, right? So the jaw stays tight. We brace and we plow on. We end up grinding our teeth at night. And we live with a tight chest and we end up shallow breathing all the time. We stifle our words that we want to say and those little huffy sighs escape. Sometimes when I'm stressed, my husband calls me huffy because I'll be just in the kitchen like all the time. So the body is gonna find ways to try to get it out. But if we're constantly armoring, the activation that we feel when we go into sympathetic, it doesn't just disappear. And what a lot of us will start to recognize is that it remains as tension and as a bubbling irritability and as restlessness or as resentment. And this chronic stress over time, if we keep suppressing and not really working with it, it starts to lower our threshold as well. So if the nervous system's already carrying a heavy load, as in you've had trauma in your past, or there is a lot of stress in your life right now, then smaller things start to give you a much bigger response. So it's like your capacity, your window to tolerate things narrows because we keep suppressing and not really addressing these stress responses. So that overload that we feel, again, starts to reduce that choice that we have. It becomes way harder to pause, harder to reflect, harder to respond proportionately. So we really want to think about all of this and how anger starts to leak out sideways. And also know that the work is never to eliminate anger. We don't eliminate parts of ourselves, we don't eliminate emotions, but it's to notice that signal, and it's to support our body's natural ability to mobilize through that energy, to respond to the unmet need, and to work this through. So let's look at the messages beneath anger. I want you to either write this down or just bookmark this in your mind. Emotions are messages. Okay, so stop seeing them as a symptom or as something to get rid of. Stop seeing them as a personality flaw and start seeing them as data. Okay, anger is just one way that your nervous system is going to communicate with you. But if you push anger down, and you don't want to be that person who feels it, so you're trying to resist it, then through that resistance, a couple of things start to happen. One is you actually turn on more of a threat response. So if you're trying to push something away and say no to it, that feels a little bit threatening to your nervous system. As in, if I'm trying to get rid of this, something must be wrong that I'm feeling this. Therefore, what is wrong with me, right? And that threat system gets turned on. The other thing that happens is burnout, right? We start to snap. The anger starts to come out in different ways. Sometimes it's through pain. Sometimes it's through the irritability. Sometimes it is through going into more of a freeze response in your life. You start to feel like you can't get motivated, or you start to struggle with pain or illness. So I really want you for a moment just to connect with the part of you that is carrying anger. So maybe if you could just think about a recent time where you noticed anger. And I want to explore with you now some of the common messages beneath that feeling. And just as I go through these, just see as you hold the part of you that's experiencing anger, see what strikes a chord with it. See if that part of you kind of goes, I resonate with that. Yes, that's the need. That's what's there. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Right. The first message beneath anger is that something needs protecting. Right. So, me or someone I love or something I value, or like a sense of fairness, anger is moving us into action and into protection. It also indicates that a need is unmet. So if we have a need that goes unmet a few times, that's usually fine, right? But the need, if there's a need there and we're actively ignoring it, or if we're in a relationship or a workplace or an environment that is actively not meeting that need, then maybe anger is actually just a message about this. So you're asking yourself, what do I need? What's missing here? Anger's message could also be that other feelings need protection. So for some of us, anger feels like a more accessible or safer thing to feel, because when a wound is triggered, then this protective part of anger will spring into action. So anger may sit over top of fear or hurt or grief or shame or rejection or helplessness. To help you see this, like how many times have you seen somebody, and I actually think of kids when I think of this for some reason, but when they get embarrassed, um, or you've pointed something out to like your partner or something that triggered some shame in them, the person reacts with defensiveness and anger, right? Have you seen that? Like, have you seen that even in your kids when they hurt themselves and so they get really angry because they're embarrassed? Or how many times have maybe you personally at some stage felt criticized, or you felt rejected, and then you felt this rush of anger come up? So sometimes there's another feeling simmering underneath it. This is a hard one to swallow. And sometimes it's that anger becomes a familiar pathway because, and actually, I'll say something that feels a little bit vulnerable to share, but my familiar response used to be anxiety. Um, if I was going through something challenging, I'd kind of go into that avoidance and flight mode. And then I had my beautiful girl, and I went through postnatal depression. And my nervous system was so stretched to capacity, so sleep deprived, that when I would be woken up in the night for the 18th time, I would have this rush of anger and rage. And that feels so hard to say. It's not something I ever took out on her, but it's something that made me feel such guilt and shame. And the anger was doing a couple things. One, it was masking how inadequate I felt and how shameful I felt. It was also saying how overwhelmed I was. But it also became a familiar pathway that I started to revert to. And the reason was because anxiety was no longer available to me, as in I couldn't avoid, I couldn't get out of the overwhelm. Where else is that sympathetic energy going to go if I can't run? And it went into that place of mobilization. My head is probably covering this, but that one says a boundary has been crossed. So sometimes anger is telling us that either somebody has crossed a boundary of ours or we've repeatedly overridden our own limits. This is a really big one, right? This is the biggest one for me, my most common thing. This is the message for against beneath my anger most of the time is that my system is completely overloaded, right? Accumulated stress, sensory load. The extractor fan is going, the TV's going, and I'm hearing mum, 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 and there's a toy going. And then poor sleep, emotional labor, all of those things when the capacity is just drained and the system's overloaded. So sometimes we actually need to take a really honest stock take of our limits. And sometimes it's that there are things that are outside of our control to change, but other times we need to get radically honest about what's within our control, what needs to be removed as a stressor, where do we need to lower the bar. My body is mobilizing me to act, right? So just asking, what action is my body wanting to take? Anger is getting me going, right? It's charging me towards something. So what's the urge there? And finally, something needs addressing or changing. This is a healthy anger, right? So what about when anger isn't a problem or isn't a message hiding some other feeling, but it's telling us that there's injustice or there's mistreatment? There's genuine violations that should not be just regulated away. And this is where we really need to hold that message that regulation does not equal calm. Regulation is a nervous system that can move through states with flexibility and eventually return to ventral vagal. Sometimes anger is exactly where you need to be. Sometimes anger is extremely healthy. What about things like systemic injustice, politics, sexism, racism, and inequality? Rage is power. So the regulation in this case is not to take away the mobilization, but to preserve your capacity in order to hold it and use it. So as I went through that, just see what of those kind of hit or landed in some way, what felt important. So we're going to just look briefly, primary versus secondary anger. This is just interesting for us to understand because it might change how we respond to it. Primary anger is that immediate protective response to something that feels wrong or unsafe or unfair or violating, right? So it can signal that something like a boundary's been crossed or something really, really matters. It could be in response to injustice and mistreatment and betrayal and anything like that. It's valid, it's healthy. And that protective, healthy anger can actually really support our clarity and our assertiveness and our self-protection. So it's really useful. And then secondary anger, as we mentioned in that last one, is that it sits on top of another emotion or another nervous system state. So it might protect us from feelings of hurt or shame or fear or grief or helplessness or rejection, or when the stress is accumulated. So in reactive overwhelm, the intensity of the response is probably just bigger than the present moment. So we can kind of check that out too, of Does the intensity of this reaction I'm having match the scenario, or is there anything underneath this? And so just a couple of examples if that isn't feeling super clear. Here's an example of primary anger. So you have a work colleague, say, and they have sort of repetitively taken credit for your work. And then you feel this kind of surge of anger. And in that moment, you say, I'd actually like to clarify that I completed that project. And so that anger there is just helping you protect your boundary and advocate for yourself. There's lots of versions of that. The secondary reactive anger might look like you've been quite overwhelmed. Work's been really busy for weeks. Maybe you haven't been sleeping super well. Maybe you've been saying yes to more than you should. And then your partner leaves a mug on the bench and you explode. Or you get into this big argument with them about it. And so the mug isn't really the problem. Your nervous system has run out of capacity. We're going to talk to our part in a minute, this angry part. And so, just to frame this, we all have protective parts that step in to keep us safe when something feels threatening or overwhelming. We all do. The people pleasing part, the critic, the overworking part, even the part that shuts you down, those are all protective parts. So, with anger, rather than seeing it as something bad or negative, let's get really curious about what it might be trying to tell you or do for you. What ways does it protect you? So, as I said before, sometimes we're responding proportionately to what's happening, and other times you can really notice that this feels bigger and that there's a protective part here that is also informed by these old experiences and past stress. And so our goal isn't to silence it, but to understand what's really happening here. And we're going to help the body then process that anger and respond differently, respond with choice rather than autopilot. So that's what we're going to move into. So today is a 3-stage anger processing tool practice that we're going to move through. You can use these 3 stages for yourself in your own time, rinse and repeat as you need them when you notice anger or your angry part is here. And so the first stage is notice. Okay, so this is the awareness phase where you use interoception, which means like your ability to kind of feel into your body's cues, what's happening inside of you, and intuition, like what does the drive, the urge, what do I intuitively want to do here? To feel your feelings and get curious about the needs and messages underneath them, right? So we're just simply in the notice stage, pausing before reaction or suppression. So this is literally just asking yourself, like, what is my nervous system trying to do? What is this feeling trying to tell me? What does my body need? What is this anger protecting? What action is my body preparing me for? And then we move into complete. So this is the part that most of us don't do. Most of us just feel it and kind of grit and carry on, and then it bubbles. So the completion stage is allowing your nervous system to move with the sympathetic activation and process the mobilization using movement practices to safely feel, express, and complete the response. I really want to say this here. This is important. This is not uncontained catharsis. So we do see a lot in different circles that there's these big rage circles and they're screaming in forests and punching pillows. And that can be really useful when it's done in a way that we're constantly checking in and responding. And it's really important we don't do this without regulation because we can actually end up increasing the anger and the sympathetic arousal rather than resolving it. So actually, some of the strongest evidence points towards practices that help the nervous system complete these defensive responses and restore the regulation, rather than just discharge the energy. So we're going to do what we do coming up might feel different than what you thought we were going to do. And then return is the third step. So once the activation has reduced a little bit, then we can start to move into sort of down regulation practices that help us to feel more safe and more contained, and to kind of transition back into a more ventral vagal state. So the 4 somatic methods that we're going to use today are going to be some interoceptive parts work, movement, some sound for completion, and then containment. And through that, we'll be moving through those 3 stage categories right here. Okay, somatic practice time. Let's get going. Let's do some movement. Let's do some practice together. Okay, before we do, well, if you're here on the live, just give me like a little emoji or let me know how you're feeling. That was a lot of information. For some of you, that's familiar. For others, that's like, "Oh, that's a lot." And you might be feeling a little bit overloaded by that, and that's okay. Maybe you could use that overload and just get angry at me in the next section. Okay, I'm seeing some love hearts popping up. Who's ready to move into the next stage? Just give me a little yes if you are ready to move into some body-based practices. Okay, seeing some thumbs up. All right, resonating a lot. Excellent. Yes, we are ready to move in. So what I want you to do for this next stage is to get, if you haven't already got it, a scarf or a towel or like an exercise band, um, just something like this that you can work with. And ideally, just like shut the doors or do something that you can feel like you don't feel like someone's going to come and interrupt you, and that you can just let yourself come into some of these practices. Now, here's the little disclaimer piece ahead of us moving into the somatic work. We're not coming into real catharsis. So we are not moving into the point of dysregulation. So if you feel like at any stage it's like feeling panicky or feeling like you're ramping up, but it doesn't feel contained, like you're allowed to get some rage out here. But if it feels really uncontained, that's moving somewhere where we're actually not helping our nervous system to process. We're helping flood it. So that's not what we're going to do. So if you notice that, you're going to grab your cup of tea or your water and you're just going to stop whatever the practice is and take a little walk around the room and do something that feels regulating, and then you can come back. Okay. So the first piece that we're going to do is actually just invite and welcome the angry part. Right? The part of us that has been bubbling up, maybe just recently, or maybe this has been happening for a while, and it's irritable. Or maybe it's actually feeling a deep sense of rage. Maybe you notice it's sort of coming up in certain times of your life or around certain people or in particular environments. And see if you can start to kind of just get a bit of a sense of this part of yourself. You might even imagine inviting it into the room for a moment, that you'd like it to pop in for a visit so that you can connect. So as I said, it might help for you just to think of a time in your life where anger has been really visiting you the most, and allow yourself to play even like a movie in your mind, a time recently where anger was really present, or frustration, or whatever you want to call it. See if you can start to begin to notice where anger is showing up in or around your body. Where do you begin to notice anger? Is that a story in your mind? Thoughts? Or is it through the emotion you can feel it? Or is it even in sensations in your body? You kind of started to notice maybe a tension creeping in somewhere. We're just going to be with that for a moment without any judgment, just with pure curiosity. See if we can get to know this a little bit. So, if this anger was an animal, what might it be? And as I ask these questions, try not to force an answer. Try not to let your cognitive mind overtake. Just see if you can let something bubble up. Let this part answer. What color is the anger? And in your body, do you get a sense of kind of the epicenter? Like where it kind of radiates from the most? And are there edges to that, or does that kind of bleed into all the areas in your body? Or do you notice that it kind of stops in certain parts of your body? Maybe it has a shape or a texture. And if it could move, what might it want to do? So I want to give you permission now for about 20 seconds to imagine that this angry part is allowed to choreograph your movements. If you feel at all self-conscious, you can take your camera off so that you can really let yourself do this. But stand up if it feels good, or stay seated if that's where anger wants you to be, and just see what anger wants you to do, what this part of you wants you to move like. And maybe it's stomping, and maybe it's punching, maybe there's flicking, maybe there's pushing, maybe there's twisting. And just invite your angry part to choreograph 20 seconds of movement, and there is no right answer. So it could be tiny. Anger might be not so sure. Just see if there's any intuitive impulse that's here that wants to be moved. Let your body complete it just for a moment. And you know what? It's allowed to look really ugly. This isn't a performance. It's not pretty. And whatever you're doing, you can stay with the movement if you like, or you can start to bring it down, turning the volume down on the movement, coming back. And now we're going to start to move through some more prescribed, if you will, practices. Because it's really useful as well to get that intuitive stuff happening. And sometimes it can feel nice to have the containment of particular somatic practices. So we're going to start with the scarf or the towel or whatever you've got, and take it into your hands. Connect again with that angry part, the stuff that's coming up for you at the moment that is bringing up that protective response. And we're going to start with some scarf rings or towel rings. So we're going to wring it as if we're trying to get out every last drop of water. And then release. I want you to notice whether you did that as something that was just going through the motions. So kind of doing what you were told. And if it was, I want you to see if you can imagine that you have just landed on earth for the very first time, and you're feeling a scarf, and you're feeling your body and your muscles for the very first time. And you're trying to almost describe it like you've never done it before. So this is about getting really mindful of the experience. So we can take another ring, and I want you to see if you can feel your hands, the muscles in your arms, across your upper back, into your shoulders. What's your belly doing? What's your breath doing? Can you let the breath breathe out in a sigh? Okay, and we can let that go again. So now what we're going to do is take the scarf and we're going to step on it, either with one foot or with both. So if you can also do this if you're seated. So if you really don't want to get out of your chair, you can still loop something underneath your feet here to do. And then what we're going to do is maybe just press our weight back into our heels a bit more so that the scarf can move underneath our feet a little bit. And we're going to start to wring it, like pull it back and forth. So it's going to take a bit of effort because your weight is on it. So you kind of have to play a little bit with your weight here and see if you can notice a couple of things. And if you don't have a scarf, don't stress. You could just literally do some pushing movements, some pulling movements. Noticing the feeling of the fabric underneath your feet. If you've got something under there. And also noticing the effort and the tension through your arms. Come back into connection with that anger. Use your breath. Keep going a little bit there if that's feeling okay. Nice. And then if you've got your scarf, you're going to take it around the back of your body. If you don't have your scarf, you're going to use a wall instead. Taking it around the back of our body, and we're going to see if we can bring our arms out to their length, they're straight, and then we're going to just take a little tie so that it becomes a little loop. And if you can't do this because you've got a towel or something else, you're just going to go and use a wall. And then we're going to bring our arms inside the loop we've created and push against it. Anger so often wants us to set up protection and a boundary and to push and to say no to something. So let your body push against this and feel that. Feel your muscles shake. Or you're pushing against a wall if you need to. When you're ready, you can bring that down. Just before we move to the next piece, just start to tune in and notice what's here. Maybe you're noticing your heartbeat. Maybe noticing how this angry part is responding to these movements. And we're going to do something that's a little bit symbolic now. So using, again, your scarf, we're going to take the end in one hand and we're going to take a wrap, one twist around our hand. And as we twist, we're going to hold this sort of imagery in our mind that each twist, each wrap is for a person who has pushed a boundary. Another wrap. It's a time that you silenced your needs or your voice. Another wrap. It's an injustice in your life. Another wrap. A frustration that you are holding, that you are carrying. Another wrap is an annoyance. And again, maybe a feeling of overwhelm that you haven't acknowledged or expressed. You can keep wrapping until you've reached the end and then begin to notice what it feels like. That restriction, the weight, and the pressure that that creates. When anger binds us without expression and without release. And just notice what that feels like and how this angry part is reacting, maybe even to to this feeling of being contained and bound and held in. And we are going to begin to unwrap one twist at a time. And I invite you to, as you go, one at a time, make some kind of a sound if that feels okay. So it might be a sigh out with a sound, or it might be even saying something you wish you could say. You might just be like, that doesn't work for me. No, I disagree. One at a time. Unwrap a layer. Feel it. Unwrap the next. When you're all the way loosened, just begin to notice that feeling now of freedom of expression and releasing restriction. And just notice what it feels like to unbind yourself from those. Okay, we're going to do a tiny pendulation practice now, where we kind of move between the expression of anger in the body and then pendulate or swing into a feeling of a little bit more ease. And it's going to look like first, we're going to get down to the ground and blow up like a balloon and stand up really tall and really tense and just really feel into the tension and the anger. And then we're going to deflate. And you can do that with a little bit of sound and a bit of shake and wiggle and wobble and coming back down to the ground. We're just going to do that twice. So we're going to start down and inflate like a balloon and imagine just letting that angry part take a shape, a posture. What does it want to do? Feel into the tension. And then slowly imagine yourself like a balloon deflating. And it might wiggle and wobble and shake and end up back down on the ground. And just hang out there for a moment. Just notice the contrast. If it feels good, go ahead and take another one. Or if you're ready, you can just stay on the ground. If that feels like where you're really ready to be. And if you're on the ground or when you get there, I just invite you to move yourself into a child's pose, if that's accessible. And if it feels like it's a bit tricky, then grab some pillows. So maybe you have a pillow propped underneath your chest and your belly or between your glutes and your heels. And maybe there's one underneath your forehead. So just get yourself supported and come down into a child's pose. Take a little moment there and check in with that angry part of you. Wondering, getting curious about whether it's feeling a little bit more seen or it's had some permission for movement. We're just going to take a couple of VU breaths here. Now, this is a vagal drill, really useful for activating ventral vagal, but also for expressing vocally what may have been held back. And so we inhale, and then on the exhale, we make the sound VOO. So VOO, a deep resonant sound. So inhale, exhale, ooh. Let your breath return to normal for a moment, and then take one more. Inhale, exhale. Ooh. In your own time, we're going to come up to a seat back at the screen and take a little containment wrap. So if you've got a scarf or a towel, just take a little wrap around the shoulders. I'm going to cross our arms over our chest and just bring in some gentle bilateral stimulation, some butterfly taps. And just notice the speed. Is this something that is really fast for you? Or is it something that's really slow and rhythmic? And have a little play with the pace. And it can be really useful to bring that pace to a heartbeat pace, just lowering that down and feeling into some belly breath, noticing whether there's any clenching or tension through the belly and just letting that go so that the breath can be invited into the side ribs, the back ribs, a full three-dimensional breath. And just for a moment, let's imagine that anger part, that beautiful protective part standing here with you, maybe beside you. So not inside you, but beside you. Notice how it may have a posture of strength or arms crossed or watching over the room. Can you imagine maybe even turning to it now and saying, thank you so much for everything you've been doing for me. I see that you have worked so hard to try to protect me and to let me know when things don't feel okay, when things feel too much. You've done everything you could in your life to keep me safe. And I'm going to really work to listen and to find out what your needs are and to meet those so that you don't have to work so hard. And just thanking it for showing up today. And as you feel ready, you can drop the butterfly taps, come back to the room, maybe a hand on heart, hand on belly, just showing a little bit of gratitude for yourself in this moment. Just checking out what's here and knowing that it doesn't really matter whether anger went away or not. That was never the intention. The intention was to come into some conversation with it and to sort of gift it with some practices. So in the chat, I just invite you, if you're here live, just to share a word or a few that would kind of represent or encapsulate what you experienced during our movement through those three stages. So it could be an emoji or it could be just a word, something that you're noticing even is present with you now. Okay. Transformative, processing and peace. Beautiful. Relief and supported, recalibration, sense of giving an outlet, release from sad to loving, flow, peaceful, supported, grounding and grounded, gratitude for the part. Yeah. Feel more comfortable facing my anger. Not alone, present. I noticed I can thank my anger for fighting against injustice for me. Yes. Surprised. My anger wants freedom. understood and confident, surrender. This is such powerful stuff, when we can just be with these parts of us and see them as supportive and protective and here to do something for us. It's so amazing, the change that can happen. You feel understood, great experience. Ferocious and sadness and forgiveness. I love those words. This is beautiful. So I want to open some time for some questions and more sharing in just a moment. So just before I do that, as I said, I was going to just let you know about a little offer. So we'll take some Q&A just in a second, but I just wanted to share with you that if you, member or not, are looking for the next steps and some deeper change, this is what I recommend moving through. Okay, so releasing fight energy is one of my master classes that is quite shadowy. It goes into a little bit of challenging, even more practices. There's a more cathartic release in there as well. So that's a really good one. Then Soma and Soul, if you've done it, you know this can be such a game changer. It's literally 15 minutes a day, and it helps to completely repattern your nervous system, and your toolbox will be overflowing with these types of practices. And then I just do not want you to sleep on this next one, and that is the 5 week journeys. So this is where you take a quiz, and we've done parts work today. This quiz helps you determine what your most protective part is out of 5 of the ones that I see the most across 16 years of doing this work. And it'll pick the top, and it'll take you on 5 weeks, completely guided to completely change the relationship with that part. So I cannot recommend enough doing that particular 5 week course, because what we learned today is really, really useful. But the most powerful thing that we can do is learn how to effectively work with your body and brain together and to personalize that. So it needs to be that we're matching tools to our particular needs. To really go deeper and create that change. And I say this as somebody who went through postnatal depression and rage, had panic attacks for years, grew up completely steeped in anxiety and imposter syndrome and people pleasing and fawning. And I used every cognitive tool in the book from my counseling training and got stuck when I started having panic attacks. I couldn't budge it. Every time I would public speak, there'd be panic. I was very stuck. And this is why I trained in this work and created this stuff. Now, this is what I mentioned about the offer. So I'll just talk to you about what that is. So it'll take me about a minute. These are some beautiful messages that came out of people who were doing this work. So it really kind of surprises people what it ends up doing. So it's like we might go in to work on anger and find out that our gut issues clear up. So it's pretty powerful stuff. This is the offer. Okay, so the membership is open now, and I'm going to be closing it soon. We've got one more opening, and then I'm going to shut it. And I'm also going to be putting the price up a bit, just a little bit, nothing crazy. I'm all about accessibility. But I haven't put the price up ever in many, many, many years. And there is like insane amounts of value in there now. So I need to kind of recognize what's there. And this is the special, is that at the moment you can lock in at 247 US for the whole year, and it will stay at that rate. So if you join now, you lock in on the current rate. So when the price goes up, it doesn't go up for you. I will honor the original pricing for the lifetime of however long you're in it. There are no contracts. You can leave anytime. But when you join now, you do lock that in, and you can go in and start straight away. It's in US dollars. The 5 week journeys and Soma and Soul. So I'm just going to leave that there on the screen if you want to scan the code. It's only live for a week, and then this will go away, that pricing. So while I just leave that there, though, what I would love is if anybody has anything that they want to ask, or they just want to share even about their experience of what came up in that class, then this is the space that I would love to invite you to do that. Um, just in some points, just ask any possible CEUs available for this. So you can count, you get little certificates after doing the courses, so you can count the courses as training towards continuing education. You can absolutely log your hours spent. I can provide a little um, piece for that, and also my practitioner training, if you're interested in the future, has 20 hours worth of that. Bev says, thank you. By reframing how I view anger has been helpful. Much appreciated. Delicious as always. Thank you, Mahi. That's lovely. Okay. So I don't know if I've got the ability to keep you off of, I'll allow you to oh, I didn't mean to ask all to unmute, but I've done it. So if anyone would like to pop on voice and just share a little bit about what they experienced or ask any questions, then you're very welcome. Yes, the recording will be sent out and you can go through and replay. What I will do is just stop that share. Okay. And I'm going to stop the recording. So those of you on replay, thank you so much for joining.